Any health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show by any host or guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before beginning any new diet, exercise, or treatment program.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Inspired and Empowered Living TV show and podcast. And we are live on Tuesday mornings at 11 a.m. on talk4tv.com, w4wn.com, and my YouTube channel. And I'm really excited. Today, we have a special guest, Kurt Rossi, and he will be talking about unraveling the secrets of money and joy and explore the intertwined realms of wealth and happiness. And we will talk to Kurt more about how he has a chapter in the upcoming book, The Power and Impact of Courageous Changemakers, Stories of Life, Love, and Business. And I also have a chapter in the book as well. And we're really excited for this book to be launching in the next couple of weeks. And we'll tell you more about that shortly. So right now, I'd like to introduce Kurt Rossi. So let's welcome Kurt Rossi. Hello, hey, Kurt.
Hi, Nancy. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing well. Happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
And thank you for joining. So Kurt Rossi is the president and CEO of Independent Wealth Management, a financial planning team dedicated to helping people uncover the meaning of true wealth in their lives. He is a certified financial planner, a chartered retirement planning counselor, and accredited investment fiduciary. Kurt holds a BS in finance from the College of New Jersey and an MBA in accounting from Monmouth University. He is an award-winning financial columnist for the Times of Trenton and NJ.com. He is also a member of the regional and national chapters of Financial Planning Association and is a contributing author of the upcoming book, The Power and Impact of Courageous Changemakers, Stories of Life, Love, and Business. Thank you again for joining us, Kurt.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. I appreciate that.
Thanks.
So I'm so excited to be here, and I'm so excited about your upcoming chapter too. I can't wait.
Yes. And my chapter is called How Intuition Saved My Eye. So perhaps we can talk more about that in a little while.
I'd like to get a sneak peek.
Yes, a sneak peek. So first of all, I'd love to hear, Kurt, how did you end up in the book? And tell us a little bit about your chapter.
Sure. So when I found out about the book, I was extremely excited because the book is really about inspiring stories. It's about inspiring change. It's about helping people. It's about people learning from each other and from others' experiences. So, when I found out about the book and was asked to contribute, I was very excited to share some of my perspectives on money and finance and happiness. And because I've been a financial advisor for, over 20 years, I've essentially lived and worked through kind of case studies about how people interact with money and the role that it plays in their life. And I've witnessed the struggles and also the triumphs. And so it's and when they learned about sort of my unique approach to money and finance and happiness, they wanted me to be a part of it. So I'm really happy to do so.
Great. Love it. So tell me a little bit about the chapter that you wrote, and I will tell you that I am actually very fascinated about how you're combining wealth and happiness and joy. I would really like to hear more about that.
Okay, sure. Well, so I guess just to take a step back, so one of the things that I really learned is that it's important to have a process that isn't just centered on numbers, right? So when people think about money and finance, they think about numbers and spreadsheets. But the truth is that, your financial well-being is connected to really a harmony and a balance between the numbers, right? Your finances, and also what you want to accomplish within your life, right? What your goals are for your life. And so finding that harmony is what so many people struggle with, right? So, and because of the difficulty with that, money is often cited as a major stressor that people experience every day, right? And I'm sure you've seen through your experience in your professional work, the ADA, the American Psychological Association, talks about how 82% of Americans cite finance as one of the primary stressors in their life. So it's something we're all dealing with. And so, at the end of the day, what I've learned through experience is that my job, as I see it, is to help people to think less about money. Because I believe if money occupies less space in your life, there's more space for the things that really have meaning. And it's not the money. Money is just a tool to help us focus on the meaning. So that's really what this chapter is about, is a discovery of what the relationship is between money and joy, and how oftentimes money can actually be an obstacle in discovering that joy.
Love it. I love the way that you're approaching it. It sounds really interesting. I'm so curious about it. What would you say are common misconceptions about money and happiness?
Sure. So I think there's been lots of studies in this area, and it's a very complex area, right? Because we're all humans, we all have different approaches to it. Some of the misconceptions, though, as many people have heard, is that this idea that there's a relationship between money and happiness, and that you need a lot of money to be happy. And it's interesting, about a little over 10 years ago, Princeton University performed a study, and they looked at it and said, okay, at what point does money no longer add happiness to your life? And because it's true, there's many people who struggle financially and are unable to take care of their basic needs. And so, of course, in that case, there's going to be a very strong connection with money, peace of mind, that sort of thing. What this Princeton University study identified was that once someone earned over $75,000 per year, and again, this is about a little over 10 years ago. So if we adjust that for inflation, it'd be a little bit higher today, especially after the last couple of years of the inflation we've been dealing with. But it was about 75,000. They discovered that people didn't show signs of additional happiness. And then a more recent study came out through the University of Penn, and they identified that there seemed to be some correlation where, as your money went up, your happiness seemed to increase. So the two teams came together just recently in the last year and went through a study, and what they have identified was that once you reach $100,000 of income now, if you are unhappy, more money is not going to make you happy. That there really isn't a connection after 100,000 if you're unhappy. So people often, as I'm sure you've seen, will look to fill that void with a lot of different things that they have in their life. Sometimes it's money and material things. It could be, other struggles that they have. But after that point, if you're unhappy, you're not going to find it through more money. And so that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions.
I love that because what I teach is real. I teach intuition, but the biggest thing that I teach is helping people to make a deeper connection within, and and as you connect more with the higher aspects of yourself and the deeper aspects, and have more self-discovery and self-awareness, your self-love, your self-satisfaction, and your happiness and confidence grows. So it actually really correlates so deeply to the work that I do as well. I love it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely.
Can you share any personal anecdotes or experiences that influenced your understanding of money and happiness?
Sure. So as I mentioned, I've had a lot of different cases and different circumstances in working with individuals and families, and like I said, hundreds of families. And there's a couple of stories that sort of come to mind, and I reference them in the chapter because I think it's really helpful for people to hear about how other people interact with money and some of the the struggles and things that they've overcome. But it was interesting. We had somebody who was referred to us and had all the outward signs of material success, right? And how we typically would measure success. So money, cars, home, things of that nature, very monetarily successful. And one of the questions that we ask all of our clients is, if money didn't matter, what, if anything, would you be doing differently in your life? And you get some pretty interesting responses when you ask that question. But in this case, this one particular person had said, if money didn't matter, I would be spending more time with my children. And he had his kids a little bit later in life. So we ran through all the numbers, crunched all the numbers, and identified that, in fact, their family was on track for their goals that they had, and that their money was in alignment with their life. But their fear was an issue, a fear of not having enough. And so in running the numbers, I said, he said, how do things look? And I said, well, the interesting thing is that you mentioned the most important thing is spending more time with your children, but you're actually trading time with your family today while you're here to leave them more money one day when you might not be. And so what he learned, you could see it just hit him. And he recognized that time is really the greatest resource, not the money. So money is important. Like I said, we need to be a good steward of the money we have and make wise decisions. But I always say that if you have a good financial plan for the future, it allows you to live more in the present. And I think that's really important.
That's such a powerful story. I feel how deeply that affected me. That's really powerful, and to remember how time is so precious, and that precious time with loved ones while they're on the planet, and being able to spend that time. And it also reminds me of the work that I do as well, which is helping people clear fears, because really what I'm hearing you say is that he had all these fears that were keeping him from his loved ones.
Absolutely. And it was, what's also sort of such a challenge is when you think about money and wealth, right? And you think about, we live in, the wealthiest country in the world. Overall. And you think about what percentage of people actually achieve a level of wealth that's significant enough where they can realize the limiting nature of the joy it can bring. So, right? So think about, so most of us are climbing this mountain. It's like, imagine there's this mountain and we all hear there's this beautiful view at the top. We're all trying to get to the top, and we spend our whole life trying to get to the top, and we spend 60%, 80% of our time climbing this mountain to create more and more wealth. And only maybe 2 to 5% actually get to the top to see the view and say, wait a minute, it's not all it's cracked up to be up here. This isn't going to bring me that fulfillment, that joy, without the meaning, without the purpose. None of that means anything. And so that's really the challenge, is that if people can recognize the limiting nature of the joy that, can come just from money alone, then how would that, reframe how they live their life, how they spend their time, what's important to them?
I love it. I'm so aligned with what you're talking about, and the things that you're sharing. It's so cool. I love it. How do societal and cultural influences shape our perceptions of money and its concept to joy and happiness? What would you say about that?
Yeah. So it's interesting. There's a quick story I tell in this chapter in the book. And I remember, did you ever play the game of life as a kid?
Yes, I used to
Right?
love it as a kid. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the game of life, you have like the little cars and you put the little peg that represent, the people and your family, and you decide what you want to do for your career, and you want to have a family, all that stuff. So my children received this game as a gift. So I'm just walking by the room, and their grandparents are setting up the game with them. And I hear my son reading the instructions, and he says, the person who gets to the end with the most money wins. And it just like hit me. I had like this moment where it's like, wow, so much of like how we live and the way we think about life is that's this purpose, is like, we tie too often our self-worth to our net worth.
Yes.
Right. And so we judge ourselves. We make comparisons to other people. And social media has made this even worse. It's magnified all of that, because in the same way people can often Photoshop their appearance on social media and kind of make things look a little bit better, people do that with their financial life too. And people make those unhealthy comparisons and feel like, oh, I'm trying to keep up with this person, or, I'll be happier if I'm, more successful like this other person, to a point where I've had clients who make significant incomes each year and actually feel self-conscious about their wealth relative to their peer groups. So I think culturally, we sort of have this propensity to tie that self-worth to what's in our bank account. And that really can be a huge struggle.
When you talk about clients feeling self-conscious, like they make a sizable money, and then how does that self-consciousness get manifested?
So I think it affects their self-confidence.
Okay.
So they look down on themselves a little bit. They feel like they're not successful when, they could be extremely successful and on track for the goals they have. And I always say, it's not what you have, it's what you needed to do that's important. So just because someone has significant wealth doesn't mean they're on a sustainable path for their future. And just because someone has less doesn't mean they actually might not be on a better path than the person who seems to have more. So it's relative, what you have relative to what you needed to do, that's really important. And, this mindset that financial planning is really about, finding that balance and that harmony.
And can you talk a little bit more about what you just said about I don't remember the exact words that you used, but it was a really interesting point of what you were talking about.
So you mean in terms of the confidence piece, like somebody feeling like they were judging themselves in making those comparisons?
There was another piece that you said. I guess I needed to write it down, and I didn't.
It's okay. It's okay.
But it was like, I'll have to, hopefully we'll come back to it. You know how when
Okay,
you
we
forget
can definitely come
something,
back.
you know when you forget something, and then
Mhm.
you're like, oh, I really want to remember, and then you can't remember. And
Yeah,
then when
yeah,
you,
yeah. No,
well,
I
hopefully
understand.
that will happen.
Okay, we'll come back. I'm sure it's something else.
Pop it.
We'll bring it to the top again.
Okay, that sounds good. How would you suggest individuals strike a balance between financial responsibility and pursuing their passions and interests?
Hmm. Yeah, that's really important. And like I just mentioned, the best financial planning is a balance between living for today and planning for tomorrow. So that's another struggle that I often see is that um, people will defer their enjoyment. And I always tell people don't wait until retirement to start living, right? Because we don't, the future is uncertain. And so you also can't just live for today and say, you know what, I'm not going to worry about the future. So it is about a balance. And one of the things that we help people to do is to figure out like, where is that line? How far can I push the enjoyment? And I think the thing that's important too is to make a connection between how you're spending your money and meaning. So it's very easy for all of us. Like, each year I take a look at some of the subscriptions we have as a family and I see, oh, we subscribe to this app that's $100 a year to identify plants when you go hiking. And we haven't used it in a year. It's like, okay, this is waste. Let's get rid of this. Versus you're spending money on something that's more meaningful and an experience or something, quality time with my children, whatever it might be. But to understand, to figure out like, what is your why? Why are you doing what you're doing? And to connect your money to your why is where you start to then uncover, the meaning, the joy, versus just feeling like you're on a treadmill, just trying to accumulate more and more money, and there isn't a purpose behind it.
I love the why. As a coach, I am always helping women get to their why, to
Mm,
understand why do they want to build a business, why do they want to create a business,
mhm.
and how their why will create that commitment for them to keep moving forward. So I love
100%. Now I'm getting goosebumps because that's, I feel so strongly about that. And I've seen so many success stories where people do that. And that's the thing too. And I want to be clear about this. There's nothing wrong with achieving financial success. There's nothing wrong with pursuing it. There's nothing wrong with building wealth, but it's just, why are you doing it? And if you're doing it just because you think it's going to make you happy, you have to understand the limitations in I think that thinking for most people. But if you are connecting it to your why, I mean, there's a lot of beautiful things that you can do from building wealth or building a business or giving back. It's just again, what is the why behind it? And I think that's sort of interesting too, because in the chapter I talk a little bit about money and how I believe it's kind of a magnifier of our emotions. So it's money in of itself is not really a problem at all, but it magnifies. So if you're fearful, money can then magnify that. Money can also it can magnify gratitude, generosity. There's a lot of positive things that can come from that. But I've unfortunately witnessed where people would say, "Oh, money tore a family apart, or a business partnership apart, or a marriage." And money is just a magnifier, I believe, of some of those underlying issues that have to be worked out. But if you can have a healthy relationship, with those do the work in those other areas, then when you're interacting with the money, it kind of all comes together.
I love that too, Kurt, because it's really interesting because we come from very different backgrounds, but a lot of what we say is similar because when I'm working with women entrepreneurs, a lot of times we're talking about money and the money blocks and what keeps them from feeling they deserve having the money and
Mhm.
what do they need to do. The work that I do helps them clear those energy
Mhm.
blocks that keep them from allowing themselves feeling worthy and deserving
Mm,
of creating the money that they deserve.
mm,
So it's so is interwoven. And when you say an amplifier, I totally believe in that being an amplifier, because money is the tool, I believe, that the universe or our soul uses
mhm,
to help us to grow
mhm,
and to help us become more of who we are. I believe like the big three are money, relationships, and health. Those are the things that when you break them down and you really look at them, they really and understand what's going on underneath. It can be life changing,
mm,
dynamic to be able to change your feelings and beliefs. In this case,
mm.
we're talking money.
Absolutely, absolutely. And where do you feel like with the entrepreneurs that you work with, that feeling of not feeling worthy of that success, or the growth in their business, like where do you feel like that comes from?
Oh, okay. Well, as I say, it's all a subconscious pattern. You know about the subconscious mind,
Mhm,
which really
mhm,
is that part of us that from the moment we were conceived to present time has recorded all the limiting beliefs and emotions. I mean, it's recorded everything, but
mhm,
in the recording of our programs are those limiting beliefs and emotions. So things that have happened to us as children, and also I believe past lives, and also our ancestors, that
mhm,
those beliefs and those emotions end up becoming the beliefs that need to be healed
mhm.
for yourself and for the women that I work with, and really for everybody.
Absolutely.
And also you'll find, and I'm wondering, actually, this is coming to me, do you find ancestral, like generational patterns in the money stuff
Yeah.
that comes up? Yeah.
Yeah. That's why
And
I was that's why I was asking you the question, because we do see that. Whether it could be things that were experienced, in their childhood. And
yeah,
people sort of tend to look at money through a lens of either like abundance or scarcity. And
yes, yes,
right. And sometimes, like you said, there's sort of like programming or things they've experienced, um and it may no longer be their story today, but they still are connected to it in some way from the past, and it sort of holds them back. It's this like limiting belief. So yeah, we do see that.
right.
And and when people recognize that, it becomes sort of powerful for them to see that it's like, wait a minute, like this is where this is coming from. Because when we show them the numbers, we look at the financial plan, it's like, here's your story today, here's how things look. And like, oh wow, like, okay, I don't have to, live in fear anymore. And one of the other things that's interesting and kind of comes up quite often, in fact, it came up just before our discussion today with a client. I had shared their whole life, they've been fearful about money. And they also experienced a time where, um, they sort of lost everything financially. Okay. So they saw some growth and they felt like they lost everything. I don't really like that phrase, because they didn't lose everything, but just financially, they saw things kind of go backwards a little bit. They took a couple steps backwards. And they've always deferred enjoyment, squirreled away as much money as they can, saved, and they've reached retirement, and they're having trouble breaking those same habits, right? So deferring, waiting, saving. And one of the things I had shared with them is that the habits that got them to where they are today are not necessarily the same habits that are going to serve them best moving forward. So deferring their enjoyment and holding back and having those fears, they've reached the point where they don't have to do that anymore. And I would say in about 1 year's time, they're really starting to make some positive improvements in that area. And it's just awesome to see. So
Yeah, it's amazing when you watch clients transform their beliefs and their emotions And that's also like you're doing it from the financial perspective, and I'm doing it from like mental, emotional shifting and clearing energy and beliefs to help them transform their lives and their businesses. So
Yeah, which is
definitely.
awesome.
What did you say?
No, I said that's amazing. And that's kind of what I see our job as. It's not to help people, to tell them where the meaning is or the joy, but to clear the financial piece of it so that they do think less about money. Because if they, if that is cleared and that attachment that they have, then, you can't imagine what beautiful things pop up, right, in that place when you can clear that out. So that's really how we view, our role in that process.
I love it. I love what you do, Kurt.
Thank you.
So, what advice would you give to someone who feels trapped in a cycle of pursuing wealth, but not experience fulfillment or happiness?
So I think there's a couple things. So the first thing that I think is important is to give a little bit more attention to your money initially. So oftentimes people avoid it. They don't know their numbers. Most people don't even know how much money they make each year on an after-tax basis, like how much they actually have to spend, or whether or not they're on track for their goals, or how much risk they have with, their investments or anything that's going on there. So most people are lacking complete information. And I think it's important when making decisions about your life, right? The most important thing to make it with complete information. So, and when you ignore it, and whether it's, money or your health or anything, if you ignore these issues, it's like these little worries that kind of float around. So what we want to try to do is just address that head on. And initially that's to get clarity. And so to understand, run scenarios, look at the numbers, see the possibilities for our business owner clients to understand how their business, how they can leverage that to propel them forward with their personal goals that they have in life. So there's, a lot of components to that, but I think knowing the numbers is really important. And then if we know what we're up against, we can address it. But for most people, they don't have clarity. They don't know. So it's important to just have that piece. I think, once you have that clarity, then I think it's really important to have some really good goal setting. And so what I mean by that is for most of us, when we're working and we have a project, let's say at work, and we're used to having a systematic process to tackle that. Like, all right, we're going to do this, this, and this. This is how we do it. We get it done. But for most of us, we don't apply those same principles to how we plan and live our life, or how we think about retirement or enjoying ourselves before retirement. So I think it's important to really go through some good goal setting. And I had the opportunity, earlier on where different, coaching programs and different things that were so valuable. One of them in particular would, share this notion of live your life by design, not by default. So not by just whatever happens, but to take an active role while also surrendering, right, to the bigger picture too, right? And recognizing we only have so much control over, what happens, but to live our life by design. And so I think having a good goal setting process helps you to develop your why, what you really value, why you're doing what you do, how the business or the income, the money connects to that. And so I think that's really important to developing that happiness, right? And using money as a tool for that versus expecting it to generate it on its own.
I do love that too, because it's so, again, the comparison in my work with clients, one of the first things that we do is set the goals. And to be really clear, the clearer you are in your goals and your vision. And I also love something that you said, and I wanted a little bit more clarity of how you look at it, which was that you you have the goals and the vision, but then you have to kind of surrender to what's unfolding. And I was just curious what you meant by that, to see if it's similar to what I believe, or what I'm
Sure.
teaching.
Well, I guess I could just share like a quick story. So, so down along the Jersey Shore, where we like to spend time in the summer, there's a town called Ocean City, and on Ocean City there's a big boardwalk, and people will ride these like Surrey bikes. Have you ever seen those? It's like a bike that you pedal, like a cart, so you can have like 4 people sitting in it. They call it a bike, but it's really more like a little cart with 4 wheels. Okay.
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
All right.
Yeah.
So the Surrey bike has 2 steering wheels on it for the people who are sitting in the front. Okay. One steering wheel actually works, and the other one just spins around. It's almost just like a place to put your hands. Okay. And so we were going down the boardwalk one day with the kids, and I had, my wife's sitting next to me, and I start to veer off by mistake, like into the other lane. And I noticed that she started to turn the wheel to the left to move us like out of the way. And then I kind of, just being a little bit sarcastic and a jokester, I intentionally veered the other way. And I noticed she started turning the wheel to the right. And then I really started to veer off towards a trash can, and she was really turning the wheel. And it sort of hit me, because I believe, in life, like, we're pedaling, right? We're controlling the motion. We're an active participant in it. But there's some times where we think we have more control than we actually do. And that's where the balance of and having that surrender and trust comes in. So not just, I think, the surrender, but the trust piece is also important. And so I don't know, for some reason, that when that happened, it just sort of hit me. It's like, yeah, we're pedaling, we're part of this, we're active, we have some control, we're making choices, free will, all that. But at some point, we also have to trust and have that surrender too.
Yes. And I look at things from a soul perspective. And to me, the soul is that core energy of who we are, that I believe that it's like the pure light and pure love, the essence of who we are. And we're in this earthly journey to learn and to grow. And we all have our own perspectives on our lives. And so things happen in our lives, either the adversities or the tools like money and health and relationships, and the challenges or the obstacles that we need to overcome. And sometimes we can't control the way that things are going to unfold. There's a phrase, I just heard, God, man plans and God laughs.
Yes. Yep. Yeah.
So it's learning to be able, like you talked about, the surrender and trust, and learning to come to that place of going with the flow, understanding more of who you are underneath the limiting beliefs and the emotions. Because the more understanding you have, the better you're able to navigate whatever life throws your way.
Absolutely. And I think, we see that a lot on the money side, because sometimes people will go through a hardship, or maybe there's, they're laid off, and it's easy to say when you're outside of that, one door closes, another one opens, like all these things. But having witnessed that for hundreds of people, it really does happen that way. And sometimes in the thick of it, it's hard to see that it is part of this bigger plan, and that things are going to unfold the way that they're supposed to. And, to trust in that, and that, maybe that initial struggle in the business isn't something you're meant to give up on. And it's just going to, force you to be more resourceful and really uncover maybe this other opportunity in it. So I think that's important too.
What if you have a client that comes to you that is experiencing the hardship? What do you do? Like, what do you suggest? How do you work with them?
So one of the things that we always encourage people to do, and not just when they have a financial hardship, we actually encourage them to do it before they experience the hardship, because panic generally occurs when something unexpected happens. So if we can sort of plan for the worst or have kind of a plan B, or think if it's used kind of like a sports approach, like to have a playbook for when things maybe don't go the way we had hoped. And so when it comes to our budget, for example, so right now, every so many years, it's very normal. We go through ups and downs with our economy. We go through ups and downs with interest rates and, inflation and all these different things. So we always encourage people to have what we refer to as a plan B budget, which is, if we need to go to plan B, if if there's a family, one spouse is laid off, they have the playbook. It's ready. Here's what we need to do. Here are the expenses that we're going to cut. Here are the non-essentials. Maybe we have to pull back on some 401k savings. Maybe whatever it is that we have to do, we have to temporarily postpone this so that we can regroup. Because oftentimes when something, unexpected happens and there isn't that plan for it, there isn't that playbook, people end up doing a little bit more damage to their financial situation because it takes them, 4 to 5 months to start taking action. And they're so shell shocked by what they're experiencing, maybe emotionally because of the difficulty, that it's hard to even look at the finances. It's like, I don't even want to look at that right now. So we help people to plan for that beforehand. So when we actually do the financial planning that we do, we'll run stress tests against these adverse scenarios so that when they happen, we can show the people we work with, like, oh, remember, like we planned for this. Look, you're okay. And like, oh, wow. Okay. And then it's like, their blood pressure just goes right down because they've realized we've already addressed it. So I think proactiveness is really important.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you so much. Are there we need to start wrapping up. So I'm just wondering, are there any last minute things that you'd like to share with our viewers and our listeners, or things that you would like to say before we wrap up?
No, I think overall, money is an important tool. We can't ignore it. So I think being proactive, developing that plan is really important. I think that, like I said, having a financial plan for the future really can allow you to live more in the present, and to remember that. Because sometimes digging into the finances isn't fun. It's like going to the dentist. Like people don't even want to look at that, but you can feel more empowered and more positive and feel optimistic about your future by really knowing and understanding your numbers. And sometimes it means treating your household a little bit like a business. What is your break-even point as a household? What does that look like? What do you need to do? And then to be able to clear that attachment to money because you have a good plan for it. And then to really discover what is the joy for you. What is your joy? What's your purpose? And be able to connect that. So I think that's really the most important thing.
Thank you so much, Kurt. And if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Best way is through our website, independentwm.com. So that's Independent WM for Independent Wealth Management. I also have a financial blog, bringyourfinancestolife.com. People can check us out there, and of course feel free to reach out. Any questions, always happy to help. But thank you so much for having me on. It's really been wonderful.
Thank you so much for being here. And I want to remind you all that Kurt and I both have chapters in the book. And I want to get the exact title because I always think of just Courageous Changemakers.
Yes.
But the whole title is The Power and Impact of Courageous Changemakers, Stories of Life, Love, and Business. And there will be a link. Next week, we are launching. So March 12th, we will be launching the book and we will have a link. And I also, next week, we will also be having the women who created their idea. Donna Domenico and Sue Shalley. And they were the ones who brought this book and brought all of us together. So join us next week for the Inspired and Empowered Living TV show on W4WN.com, Talk4TV.com, and my YouTube channel. And I wish you all an inspired and empowered day and an inspired and empowered week. Have a great one, everybody. Bye for now.